Turn left onto Brunswick Road, then turn right onto Eastgate Street. In 200 yards, turn right onto Eastgate Street. Turn right onto Eastgate Street. In a quarter of a mile, continue onto Barton Street B4073. Continue on B4073 for 1 mile. In 200 yards, at the roundabout, continue straight onto Painswick Road B4073. Exit the roundabout onto Painswick Road. Continue on B4073 for 1.5 miles.
Yeah, we're probably there now.
200 yards, turn left onto Birchall Lane.
Okay. I will not go in the road.
Turn left onto Birchall Lane. In 300 yards, turn right onto High Street. Turn right onto High Street. Continue on High Street for half a mile. In 200 yards, slight left onto Portway. Slight left onto Portway. Continue on Portway for 1 mile. yards, turn left onto Cotswold Way.
Well, that's what I noticed. Nice and easy.
Turn left onto Cotswold Way, then slide right onto Cotswold Way.
What, you want me to go down the hill?
Slide right onto Cotswold Way, Sanatorium Road, then turn right onto Sanatorium Road. Turn right onto Sanatorium Road, then slight left onto Buckhold Road. Continue on Buckhold Road for 2 miles. Of a mile, continue onto Main Lane. Continue on main lane for 3/4 of a mile. Turn right onto B4070. Turn right onto B4070. Continue on B4070 for half a mile. Onto Kathmandu. Keep left onto Calf Way. In 200 yards, turn left. Turn left. Continue for 5 miles. right. Turn right, then you will arrive at your destination.
This is not my destination.
You have arrived.
Well, let's start. Let's go this way. Not to the side of this way. Yeah, sorry.
continue on A419 for 1.5 miles.
alright?
Where are you?
I made it to Cirencester.
You're where?
I'm in Cirencester. I made it. I'm going back though.
You're in Cirencester?
Yeah, but no one's in, so I'm going back.
Oh, bloody hell.
So, how you doing?
Oh, well, take it steady.
How you doing?
I'm alright, I'm home.
Okay. So the thing's now insured as well, so...
I can't hear you.
It's insured now.
Oh well done.
Right, yeah, I'll see you Sunday.
Alright, I'll see you Sunday.
Alright, bye.
Bye.
completed save file into a pretty ridiculous state. Generation 3 is probably one of my favorites when it comes to softlocks. There are so many things about these games that just so happen to let you ruin them in the most creative ways. Even when you think you may have seen it all, when there are so many different Pokemon items and abilities, there are still new twisted setups that you can make happen if you're evil enough. So for today, we'll be returning to the Hoenn region to do exactly that. No further introduction required. Here's how you can take a game of Pokemon Emerald and make it almost unplayable. For this particular video, you're first going to need a level 99 Larvitar on a completed save file that has access to both the SS title and Pacifilog Town. However, the key items that have been obtained in this playthrough are important. In order for the setup to work, you need to ensure these three things. Number 1, do not get the Whalmer Pail. This is an optional item obtained at the flower shop outside of Rustboro. It's pretty easy to avoid getting, and I think that most people don't bother with it anyway. Number 2, get the old rod, but none of the other fishing rods. At Dewford, you can speak with a fisherman to receive the old rod. This is the weakest fishing rod in the game, and you want to make sure that you only have this one and not the good or super rod. Number 3, do not get the HM for Rock Smash. This last one might confuse you, as Rock Smash is not meant to be an optional item. The player needs to be able to smash rocks in order to progress through the game. However, technically, only the move is required, not the HM. If the player takes the time to do so through their playthrough, they can train a Pokemon with Rock Smash to this game, so that they can use the move without ever obtaining the HM. Making sure that your key items are set up this way is important, because in Gen 3, it is not possible to get rid of them later. This is also the first gen where it stops letting you store them in the PC as well. And outside of key items, there is another important thing you need to do in this save file. Make sure you head to Route 120, go to this spot, and defeat the invisible Kecleon on this tile. So now that you have your oddly specific completed game, I'm going to show you what to do next with it. At this point, I only have 4 Pokemon on this save. Blaziken the starter, a Wingull and Zigzagoon are my only remaining HM users, and a level 99 Larvitar. Take the Larvitar to the movie leader and make it so that its only move is Hyper Beam, 5 PP. Next, toss away all of your items, all except for a single Legendary. This should be the only non-key item in your inventory. Now with your 4 Pokemon, head to Pacifilog Town and use the Pokemon Center here. After doing this, head all the way back to the daycare near Mauville. As I've shown in previous videos, trying to release your last remaining HM user doesn't work in this game. If you try, the Pokemon will just return with a message saying that it was worried about you. This feature exists to stop the player from accidentally trapping themselves in an unplayable game state. But luckily for us, another way to cut off access to HM users is to just put them into the daycare. But this is why all of your HM moves need to be shared between 2 Pokemon. Once they are gone, head over to the PC here and release all other remaining Pokemon, aside from the Larvitar. When this is done, we're going to head to Route 120 again. Ordinarily, you would need Surf or Fly to get here from Mauville, but if you walk back to Slateport, you can take the ferry to Lily Cove. From here, you just have to go a little bit to the west to reach the route. For this next step, you might have to save and reload a few times. We're going to be doing some encounters, but need to make sure they go in a way where Larvitar gains no experience points. We need to get Hyper Beam down to 0 PP, so we'll need it to miss in battle 5 times. As well, we have to find a Wild Oddish, and have it use Poison Powder on Larvitar. Make sure to run away from the battle once this is accomplished. Now that Larvitar is poisoned, head over to this area here. We're going to walk back and forth for a while, taking poison damage until Larvitar is at 1 HP, and is exactly 1 step away from fainting. Remember that you take poison damage in the overworld every 4 steps, so during the final cycle, make sure that your 3rd step stops you on this specific tile right here. Many of these steps probably looked entirely random, but everything we just did here has made the game nearly unplayable. So let's take a closer look and see exactly why that is. As mentioned before, we are now literally 1 step away from having Larvitar faint from poison. Because Larvitar was our only Pokemon, this will send us back to the last Pokemon Center that was used, and in this case, it was the one in Pacifilog. Because we no longer have access to our HM users, it becomes impossible for the player to leave the town. The only way to get out of here is to either use Surf or Fly. Some of you might be thinking, why not just catch a new Pokemon to teach Surf? Well, there is actually no Pokemart in this town, so it's impossible to buy any Pokeballs to catch anything else. In addition to that, Larvitar remains our only Pokemon. I've mentioned this in several videos now, but in Gen 3, you cannot trade with another game unless you own at least 2. So once the player ends up in Pacifilog Town, there is absolutely nothing they can do to leave small section of the game, unable to do anything, pretty much forced to start a new save. This is what will happen if the player takes a single step off of this tile in Route 120. The next question some of you might be asking is there a way to reset the 4-step counter for poison damage? This is also something I considered and looked into. You might assume that resetting the game and loading back in would give you 4 steps again, but this is not the case. However, interestingly enough, something that does reset the 4 steps is a wild Pokemon encounter. If you use the old rod on the lake in front of you, you cause an encounter to happen. After you immediately run from it, you will be able to take the 4 steps again instead of 1. Unfortunately though, this ultimately makes no difference, since after you move away from the lake, you will not be able to cause another encounter to continue moving. You'll just faint from poison damage anyway. Now that I've established why we can't ever move from here, the next question is obvious. How do you get out of this? Believe it or not, there is still something you can do. You see, there is a good reason that I picked a level 99 Larvitar. Because it can still gain a level, it's still possible for it to evolve into Pupitar. Why is Pupitar important? Well, it's because it has a little ability called Shed Skin. This ability allows the user to remove its status conditions like poison at the end of the turn. And even better, it does this before poison damage is applied for the turn. I think you can all tell where I'm going with this. If the player can level up and evolve Larvitar, then they will be able to move again and escape this situation, avoiding their save file becoming a worthless Pacifilog simulator. This brings us to the next question: how do you level up Larvitar? As shown before, we have the old rod, and there is a lake in front of us, so we still have wild encounters. But there is a tiny problem here. Larvitar no longer has any PP for its moves. If you try to attack in this state, you'll use Struggle, and then immediately faint from the recoil damage. You won't even gain experience, and then will be sent back to Pacifilog's Pokemon Center, which is pretty much game over in this situation. Sure, the old rod does work in this town, but once you're here, there is nothing to gain by evolving Larvitar anymore. You're stuck. And this brings us to the part where we talk about the one useful item we left in our inventory, the Lepiberry. And by using this berry, you can restore up to 10 PP to a single move. Obviously though, using it to restore Larvitar's 5 Hyper Beams isn't going to give us enough moves to reach level 100. So instead, we're going to need to do something else with this berry. We're going to plant it in the patch of soil to the right. In Gen 3, plant a Lepiberry will grow into a plant that you can First off, at level 99, Larvitar requires 37,127 experience. And because we only have the old rod, the Pokemon that we can battle are Wild Magikarp and Goldeen. These two can both be found between levels 5 and 10. A level 10 Magikarp will give 28 EXP. A level 10 Goldeen, however, will give 158 EXP. Obviously, if we want the highest amount of experience possible, we'll only want to find and defeat level 10 Goldeen. This is also why we got rid of that one Kecleon earlier. It would have been possible to get just a little extra experience from it, but now we can't. Because we start with 0 PP for Hyper Beam, we have no choice but to wait 16 hours for a Lepiberry to recharge it. And this is why I said not to pick up the HM for Rock Smash. Rock Smash is the only HM move in this game that Larvitar can learn. If you had it, you could teach it to them. They would have a move that could recover the full 10 PP and instead of the limited 5 on Hyper Beam. Anyways, assuming that the player would always use its Hyper Beams to gain the most experience possible, they would gain 790 experience points, beating 5 level 10 gains every 16 hours. Now that we have all that sorted, let's brace ourselves as we learn just how long it'll be before Larvitar earns that 37,000. 16 hours into the cycle, you can get 790 EXP. 80 hours in, your total will be at 3,950 EXP. 160 hours in, it'll be 7,900 EXP. 320 hours in, you'll have 15,800 EXP. 640 hours in, it's at 31,600 EXP. And finally, 752 hours in, the total will have reached 37,130, which is exactly 3 points over what Larvitar requires. That's right, after over several hundred hours, you can finally evolve Larvitar into Pupitar, and then use its shed skin ability to rid itself of the poison status, allowing you to walk around freely again. Keep in mind, this is the minimum amount of time required. This is all under the assumption that the player will always return to the game every 16 hours on the dot. Amusingly, because of the difference with Pupitar's HP stat, after evolution, it'll go from having 1 HP to a lot more. In my case, it was 44. And this might be enough on its own to get you back to a Pokemon Center, but Shed Skin is still the consistent method of getting rid of poison immediately. Either way though, the fact remains that getting Larvitar to level 100 is the only way to escape this situation. From here, the rest of the game is accessible again and can be played normally. Like I usually say at the end of these videos, there is no way that anyone would ever make their game like this on purpose. But it's still amusing that it can happen in the first place. We didn't need to mess around with any game-breaking glitches. All we did was use intended mechanics in unintended ways. Instead of going on an adventure, our trainer has instead ended up on the worst camping trip of their life. They have to spend hundreds of hours feeding their Pokemon fish and berries until they can finally go home. My name is McCaspry. Thanks for watching. Hello Internet users and welcome back to another video. So I've been making these softlock videos for quite a while now. Since the very beginning though, I've often been asked about a certain location in the Pokemon universe, Cerulean City. Cerulean City is a very unique place that just so happens to have several things that can be used to trap the player. For starters, when you first arrive at the city, you have to fall down a ledge. This is a one-way road and the player is unable to go back or leave the general area until they advance the story a bit. Inside Cerulean, the exit to the south is blocked by both an NPC and a small tree. To the west, there is a house that is blocked off by another NPC. This character doesn't move aside until the player meets Bill at the cape. In order to reach Bill, the player must travel north across a bridge. However, there is a forced encounter with the rival here, and he must be defeated before you can continue. With things arranged as they are, all you have to do is figure out a way to make this rival battle unwinnable, and then your entire save file is stuck. A big reason that Cerulean City gets brought up a lot to me is because technically, many of the previous topics I've covered could easily apply here too. You could just release all of your Pokemon and leave yourself with something weak like a Magikarp that can't battle. Or you could go with something like Electrode, who has had all of its moves deleted except for self-destruct. Because of how early in the game Cerulean City is, the player has very little resources to work with. They can't even get the first HM yet. With the right Pokemon, escape seems like it could be more or less impossible. This is especially the case in Fire Red and Leaf Green. In those games, as long as the player has only a single Pokemon, they're unable to trade with another cartridge. And that brings us to the topic of today's video. Since Cerulean City has the potential to be used in so many different softlocks, I wanted to see if I could come up with something unique that can only be done here. And after a bit of time planning this, I think I've managed to do exactly that. Get ready everyone, because I'm going to show you one of the most evil save files that I've ever created. And for this one, I'll be playing on Fire Red version. So first of all, I need to show you how to set it up. I've covered these basic steps so many times on the channel before, so let's try to get through this quickly. Obviously, you first need to play a new game normally until you reach Cerulean City. Once you've reached the bottom of that ledge, the real fun will start. First, pick up all of the hidden items within the city. Next, you need to defeat Misty. This will ensure that the only possible trainer battle will be from the rival encounter to the north. Now, Now, like in every other video, it's time to throw away all of your money and items. This is so the player will be unable to buy or sell anything once the setup is complete. For the next step, you'll need to trade to get a shiny Poliwhirl on this cartridge. However, for this to work, its moves must be Hail, Substitute, and Belly Drum. The PP for Hail must also be maxed out. Yes, I am serious. Just bear with me, you'll see why we need something this specific later on. And finally, you need to release all of the Pokemon on this save file, except for that shiny Poliwhirl. Since this is Gen 3, trading with other games will become unavailable. You're not allowed to do this unless you own at least 2 Pokemon. And with that, once we save the game, the setup will be complete. So let's take a closer look and see why this game has become unplayable. As we've established earlier, it's now impossible to go backwards in the game, and the only way forward is to go through the rival at the bridge. However, with our Poliwhirl's current moves, this battle isn't possible anymore. Each of these 3 moves will cost Poliwhirl HP to use. Belly Drum requires half of the user's max HP, and Substitute requires a quarter. And while Hail doesn't technically cost HP to use, there is no way to avoid taking damage from the weather effect once it's used. Hail will damage Poliwhirl for a 16th of its max HP. If you try to use Substitute first, you'll also find that Poliwhirl will still take weather damage, even if the Substitute is still active. No matter what kind of combination of moves you try to use here, Poliwhirl cannot defeat the rival's first Pokemon. You won't be able to do anything except make it easier for Poliwhirl to be defeated. And of course, when you lose the battle, you'll be sent back to the last Pokemon Center, which in this case should be Cerulean City. So since Poliwhirl can't battle with these moves, we have to consider the next option, using Struggle. In order to use Struggle, we're going to need to use up all of Poliwhirl's PP. Aside from the rival though, the only place we can battle at is this patch of grass next to the ledge. Here's the thing though, with how things have been set up, it should now be impossible for Poliwhirl to use up its moves without fainting first. If it can't pay the HP cost for Belly Drum or Substitute, then the moves will simply fail, while still costing a single power point. In the case of Hail though, Poliwhirl will still take the damage regardless. So logically, you would think that if you used up all of Hail first, you could then waste Substitute and Belly Drum by having them fail over and over. However, you need to remember a few things about Hail. The first is that there is no way for the move to possibly miss or even fail under the current circumstances. Poliwhirl is guaranteed to lose a 16th of its max health every time it uses the move. This damage cannot be avoided. The second thing to remember is that this Poliwhirl has had its PP for Hail maxed out as a part of this. And what is the maximum number of uses you can extend Hail to? 16. The next thing you need to know is how the damage is actually applied to Poliwhirl. So let's say as an example that we're using the wild encounters in the most optimal way possible. We're going to manually save between every encounter, making sure that the only damage we take comes from using Hail, and not from any enemy attacks. In this situation, the level 43 Poliwhirl with 111 HP will always be left with 15 HP after using all 16 Hails. Why is it not KO'd by this point? Because of a weird quirk with how the game calculates damage. 111 divided by 16 is 6.9375. Curiously, the game does not round this up to 7. Every time Hail is used, Poliwhirl will always take exactly 6 points of damage. The result of this is that the Pokemon is left with a little extra HP at the end. 15 HP isn't much, but it is enough to use Struggle, and also gain experience from wild Pokemon. It's just enough for Poliwhirl to stay standing after the recoil damage. Don't get too excited though. If you think you can take advantage of this to level up Poliwhirl until it learns an attack, you're very mistaken. True, it's possible to reach level 44 by doing this enough times, but that's as far as you'll ever go. With this specific Poliwhirl stats, its HP at level 44 will always be 113. Keep in mind that none of the wild Pokemon available are able to give HP effort values, so nothing can be done to influence the stats growth. 113 divided by 16 is 7.0625. So now, Hail will be dealing 7 points of damage every time it's used. After its 16 uses, Poliwhirl will always be left with only a single hit point. And with that, it becomes impossible to gain any more experience because Struggle's recoil will now be too much. The situation is very similar to being stuck with a Pokemon that can only self-destruct. except in this case, it's a lot slower. The player cannot advance forward and is stuck forever in this town. There is nothing this Pokemon can do without KOing itself in the process. This poor Poliwhirl is cursed to eternally have a storm cloud above its head, constantly pelting it with ice. What's even more ironic is the fact that its ability is Damp, which is supposed to stop self-destructing moves from happening. And if you think this trap isn't already bad enough, don't worry, because it's about to get even worse. You see, there is actually one thing you can do to escape this place. I'm sure many of you have already figured this out and are dreading what I'm about to say next. In Cerulean City, there is an NPC that wants to trade with the player. He's offering a Jinx in exchange for a Poliwhirl. Now, you might think that this trade is inaccessible, since Poliwhirl is the player's only Pokemon. However, as it turns out, the rule of requiring two is ignored for the trades with NPCs. At this level, the traded Jinx would know Ice Punch and Double Slap, which would easily let you continue the save file with no problems whatsoever. The issue here, though, is that you need to give up a shiny Pokemon to pull off the escape. While it is possible to do this trade beforehand in order to make this a true lock, I think that leaving it like this is a lot more sinister. Imagine giving this cartridge to someone, telling them that they can have the free shiny Poliwhirl. Then imagine the look on their face as they realize that they can't escape from here without first giving it away. This lock is like a treasure chest where the treasure disappears as soon as you try to take it out. It's a completely guaranteed escape method that requires no random chance at all, but you have to give up one of Pokemon's rarest rewards in the process. To some Pokemon fans, this might not be a big deal at all, but to others, this would be their worst nightmare. You also have to question if this game is even worth saving this way. Once Poliwhirl is gone, you're left with a save file that's made very little progress. Going through with the trade is almost the same as giving up and starting a new game. Either way, that shiny Pokemon is gone forever. Some of you might be thinking though, well, what if I just reset until the Jinx becomes shiny too? However, that will not work either. There are many things about this Jinx that are already predetermined, including its nature and trainer ID. No matter how many times you reset, this Jinx will never become shiny. From what I understand, this is how in-game trades work in Fire Red and Leaf Green. In other games though, such as Pokemon Let's Go, the NPC trades do have a chance of resulting in shiny Pokemon. And there you have it, everybody. Hello Internet users and welcome back to another instructional video on how to not play Pokemon. When it comes to soft locking the Pokemon games, I'd say that the one generation I've gotten the least requests for has been the second one, and that's really not too surprising. Because of the focus on its real-time clock system, there are numerous named items and events that can be accessed. Thus, the player almost always has a way to obtain even if they got rid of everything intentionally. Of course, there have been soft locks discovered over the years, with similar setups to what I've covered before in Gen 1 and 3. You can strand yourself on some of the islands, unable to fly or swim to safety. However, for this video, I wanted to do something a bit more elaborate. By using the game's own clock mechanics against it, I wanted to see if I silver version does not have Caterpie in this location, and if you're playing that version, you'd have to get one by entering the bug catching contest at National Park. Although we don't need Caterpie specifically, the reason I've chosen it is because it is unable to learn any moves. Quite literally, Caterpie can only ever know the moves Tackle and String Shot. No TMs, no HMs, no level up moves, not even the possibility of egg moves. Because it has access to next to nothing, this makes Caterpie a perfect Pokemon to use for an obnoxious softball. Number 2, go back to the Pokemon League. With Caterpie in hand, the next thing we're going to do is immediately return to the Pokemon League. This means that we'll be completely ignoring Professor Elm, who at this point is waiting to give us a tip for the SS Aqua. It should go without saying, but when heading back to the League, it is important to use the same path you took the first time. If you enter from Meridian City, then this lock will no longer be possible to set up. You see at the gate where the players' badges are checked, there are 2 NPCs blocking off 2 entrances. The one on the left guards that silver and will not disappear until you've collected all 8 of the Kanto badges. The one on the right blocks the road leading to Meridian City. The event trigger to get him to disappear permanently is to enter this building from Meridian City. Most people might assume that he'd go away when you become the champion, but he remains here so that the player has no choice but to enter Kanto via the SS Aqua. Number 3, pick up every item available. For the next step, you can probably see where this is going. This track is going to involve being stranded within a long stretch of areas. The starting point for this cage is when you cross the water after leaving Tojo Falls. The end point is, of course, the Pokemon League itself. So now, in preparation for what's next, we'll need to pick up every single possible item between these 2 points. This includes all of Route 26, Route 27, and Victory Road. There are also a few hidden items, so make sure you get those as well. Number 4, release all of your other Pokemon. Now that we're back in the Pokemon League, the next step is to release all of your Pokemon except for Caterpie. In the first 2 generations, there are no restrictions on what Pokemon can be released, so it's easy to get rid of all of your Pokemon that know or are able to know HM moves. Number 5, get rid of all your items and money. You should all know how this goes by now. Spend everything you have and then throw your entire inventory away. Now we'll be unable to buy Pokeballs and have nothing to sell either. And now for the final step. Heal and save at the Pokemon League. Once this is done, you will have succeeded in putting your save file in a very horrific state. Let's take a closer look at this and really examine how dire the situation is. Right now, our only Pokemon is a level 3 Caterpie. If we were to advance forward into the Elite Four, Caterpie would not be able to make it past Will's first Pokemon, let alone his entire team. Upon losing, the player will return to the Pokemon Center that was last used, which is of course the Pokemon League. If we instead try to go backwards, we'll have to go through Victory Road again. You might assume that this is impossible as well, due to the level of the wild Pokemon here. Every encounter would no doubt prevent the player from running away, and would result in Caterpie being knocked out. However, an easy solution to this is to simply save the game every time you take a step. Whenever you get an encounter, simply reset the game and continue the process. Although it may be tedious, this method guarantees that the player can always get through Victory Road regardless of what Pokemon they have with them. It's also worth noting that in Gen 2, there are no HM moves required for this area. So now that we're back at Route 26, we can continue the travel backwards until we reach the water's edge at Route 27. This is as far as we can go since Caterpie cannot learn Surf. At this point, all of the trainers on Route 26 and 27 would be defeated. However, there is still a way to battle some of them. A mechanic introduced in Gen 2 is the ability to exchange phone numbers with certain trainers. Occasionally, these trainers will call the player, sometimes asking for a rematch. This, however, will make a difference in our current situation. Within the few areas that we're stuck in, there are a couple of trainers that can be rebattled. Unfortunately, they are simply too strong for Caterpie to do anything but lose. As well, a feature that is exclusive to Pokemon Crystal is that a select few of these trainers will randomly call and give the player special items. However, once again, the trainers we have access to are not among the group that can give these items. For Crystal version, there technically is an item given to Route 27, which is out of range of consider to get to where it is. If you thought you could try and level it up Caterpie for 1,000 members, I'm afraid that isn't going to work. actually is possible to still trade with another game, even when you only have one Pokemon. However, I usually don't focus on that too much. The main reason I do these videos is to examine how a game can be made unplayable by exploiting its intended mechanics. In my opinion, if you've reached a point where you need additional hardware, software, and an add-on just to put your save file in a playable state, you've more than proven that there is a fatal flaw within the game's design. However, for this particular video, I've set things up so that attempting to trade will also be as inconvenient as possible for the player. As you'll recall, this has been set up on a Japanese version of Pokemon Crystal. When it comes to the first two generations, the Japanese versions are only able to perform a successful trade with other Japanese versions. Let's say, for example, you try to connect a North American Pokemon Gold to this Crystal cartridge. Although the games technically could initiate a trade sequence, the data on the cartridges are too different. If these two games were to go through with the trade, both would freak out, having no idea what kind of Pokemon data has been sent to them. This will result in the corruption of the save file of both games in this situation. You might be wondering, if that's the case, then why is a trade even allowed to occur between a Japanese and non-Japanese game? Well, at the time of Gen 2's release, the chances of this kind of trade occurring between casual players were incredibly slim. Whether the localization team was aware of this potential game corruption or not, it certainly didn't seem worth the time or effort to put in some kind of measure to disallow trading with Japanese cartridges. However, I should mention that in the case of the 3DS Virtual Console versions, the games actually do now prevent trading between Japanese and non-Japanese games. This is due to the fact that the VC releases make use of the 3DS's wireless functions to connect the games together. In the process of this change, it made perfect sense to stop a well-known game corrupting issue with the original trade feature. It may have taken almost 17 years to address, but better late than never, I guess. But anyway, the point of all this is that in the save file we've set up, an escape via trading is only going to be possible using another Japanese cartridge. Additionally, during the setup, you'll recall that I said to avoid the Equity Pokemon Center. Because of this save file does not have the time capsule event active, meaning that the player also cannot trade with the Japanese versions of Gen 1 either. It should also go without saying that the VC releases cannot connect to a Game Boy either. With this, we have severely limited what our game can even connect to. So let's say that once you've set up this soft lock, you've handed the Game Boy cartridge to a random Pokemon fan and told them to escape. If they were to do this by using something other than the game itself, they would need the following: additional Game Boy, a link cable, a Japanese Gen 2 cartridge, which the current year will likely require a replace save battery to work. And if they were to try and use Pokemon Stadium 2 instead, they would need a Japanese copy of the game, an N64 transfer pack, either a Japanese N64 or a modded N64 that can play Japanese ports. Remember, the goal here was to make trading as inconvenient as possible, and I think most would agree the majority of fans aren't going to have these things just laying around. If at that point, for some reason wanted to spend some money on these things, it would be much cheaper to just buy a cheating device to get yourself out of this. So for the people that demanded I take trading into account for the older generations, I've made it inconvenient enough to the point where cheating is infinitely easier and more affordable. By the way, a fun fact: sometime after I recorded footage of myself walking through walls, when I booted up the English save file, my character had suddenly changed into a girl, while still having the color palette of a boy. This won't go away no matter what I do, and I have no idea why this occurred, as I've messed with this exact cheat plenty of times in the past with no issues. I know that there is a well-known glitch that lets you do this intentionally, but I swear I didn't do anything close to that. I'm only just guessing that my brief instance of walking through walls was what triggered this, because I really have no other way to make sense here. So anyway, for the rest of this video, some of the English footage will now feature my changed character instead. I didn't want to replay the entire game again just to keep the last few pieces of footage consistent, but I'm pretty much forced to edit in an explanation now so I don't get 1,000 comments asking what's going on. And just pretend that everything is fine and add this to the list of nonsense you're seeing in this video. But anyways, that aside, as things are now, you may be wondering if there is still any other options available to the player. Compared to some of the other soft locks I've previously done, this one gives us quite a bit of extra room to wander around. But still, we're seemingly stuck with no way to continue playing the game normally. Provided that you've done the setup properly, it really seems like there's nothing you can do except start a new game or wander around endlessly get knocked out. However, in this situation, there is still one thing you can do. One tiny detail that provides the obvious but obnoxious escape I mentioned earlier. Within our prison, there is only one single way to obtain more items, and it comes from this tree here on Route 26. Because Gen 2 introduced both a time system and held items to the series, there are plenty of these trees placed throughout the game. Once per day, the player can pick items like berries from these trees. Because these are pretty much an infinite source of obtaining items, the sell price and positive effects of these berries are very minimal. For this particular tree, we can pick an ice berry, which when consumed heals a Pokemon's burn. So you might be asking, well, if there's a tree here, then all you have to do is pick enough berries to sell until you can afford a Pokeball, right? And you're correct. That is absolutely what we're going to do. However, doing that is not as nearly as simple as you might expect. You see, if you were to take that ice berry all the way back to the Pokemon League, you would discover just how little value it has, only being worth literally 5 Pokedollars. Now next, you need to realize that a standard Pokeball costs 200. That means that in order to afford a single one, you'll need exactly 40 ice berries, which means that in order to escape, you'll need to wait for at least 40 real-life days to pass, making sure to check in daily to obtain every ice berry. That certainly sounds annoying, doesn't it? But it isn't the most unreasonable thing in the world. After all, once you have that single Pokeball, it's just a matter of saving and resetting until it actually catches something. Then you can teach that Pokemon Fly or Surf and get yourself out of here. Unfortunately, if you thought it was going to be that easy, I've got some bad news for you. You see, in Gen 2 at the Pokemon League, they don't actually sell Pokeballs. No, they only sell Ultra Balls, which cost 6 times more than a normal Pokeball. I think you can see where I'm going with this. So, in this scenario, this means that the escape method will require you to pick 240 daily ice berries, all just for the chance to obtain another Pokemon. And this is exactly what makes this particular trap so cruel. Going back to the idea of giving this cartridge to a random Pokemon fan to try and escape, just imagine how someone would react. At first, they'd probably appear to be really confident, since they appear to have such an open area to explore. But as they wander, they'll soon realize that they actually can't do a single thing besides interact with this tree. Once they realize how much the berry is worth and how long it'll take to afford their escape, I guarantee you that the life in their eyes will fade in the most satisfying way imaginable. But right now, there might be some of you out there clinging to hope, asking, what if you just manually change the game's clock until you have 240 berries? And unfortunately for you, I also thought of that too. So most people don't seem to be aware of this, but in Gen 2, there is actually a secret method to changing the in-game clock. And